been a real change in our life from an Alfa down to a staid little old 1300 Toyota Corolla. This car became a major part of our married life. What happened was, first of all, that having worked at Netfin, I understood financing quite well. And when I had this finance at Westbank, I could see that they'd made a mistake on the contract. I pointed it out to them, and of course, no way would they listen to me. So I accepted it like that. It was a thing with a balloon payment at the end. They worked the finance charges out incorrectly. And the way it worked out, that the longer I kept this car, the more money I would be making. So we kept it and kept it and kept it. Because of our downturn in our finances at this particular stage, Maria got a job as well. She got a company car, which I'm not going to go into those cars because this little story will go on forever and ever. But we had this car, and it never gave us any trouble. It really just kept on running. 1300 or not, it was amazing. Eventually, our children got bigger and bigger, older and older, and they had left school. The oldest one, he who wrote off many cars, and he got a job in Mafeking. He had an opportunity to do representative work for this company, but he needed a car. He had to provide his own car. So we then gave him this car, and I bought an old Volkswagen that I'll get to ride around in. Because by this time, I'd also managed to get a job at United Building Society, and I worked on a commission basis for them doing investments where we really did well. And we had this car for many years. And years after Mark sold it, he found it in Petersburg, where somebody had bought it there, and it was still going strong. Then into our motoring lives came Hondas. I had to buy a car. I couldn't keep on riding out with a little Volkswagen that I'd purchased. The door wouldn't even close properly on that one. We decided on a Honda. I went and had a look. Always being price conscious, I bought a Honda 1300. That car turned out to be the car I had for absolutely the shortest time. I had it for 3 days, and I realized this thing with a 1300 motor wasn't a Corolla with a 1300 motor. No comparison. I traded it back in immediately on a 1500. We enjoyed that car for many years as well. Did lots of trips on it. It was a great car to have. Now back away a bit from the cars that I'd been driving. We'd always had this old Volkswagen that I'd used for the period in between where we were changing jobs. When our middle son, he got a bursary and he was studying as an actuary, we gave the car to him to use at Tikkies. Children being children, he wouldn't listen, and coming home after a visit to Barberspan with friends of his, they were going to sleep over at our house, and then decided no, they were going to go through to Potchefstroom. Early the next morning, the dean phoned us and said that we mustn't have a fright, but Michael had been in an accident. He fell asleep and overturned this Volksie on the way back to the university. He had severe head injuries. He was unconscious for a week at least. He had learned to eat and walk, the whole tutti. Marie did wonders with him at that stage. He had to eventually leave his studies. This then led to a thing where this car was standing in our backyard, all bent and buckled, and my daughter and I went on a hiking trip to Vrede, and under our tarpaulin on the farm we were on, we lifted it up, and there was a Volksie. The body in beautiful condition. Engine had it and everything, and we bought it for, I can't remember, a few rand. It wasn't a big deal. I went and fetched it, brought it back home, and my eldest son, he, of the writing off of cars in the garage, rebuilt these two cars. We took the body off the one from the farm and built it onto the one Michael had the accident with. And it resprayed, the upholstery done up. That car gave Michael service for years and years and years. The second photo shows the end result of the change. We sprayed it red, and this was Michael proudly in front of his new shiny Volkswagen Beetle. I, of course, still had that Honda 1500 at this stage, and we were going up to Joburg for some other reason, and at Stilfontein, this thing started shuddering, and I decided then and there that I was going to buy another car. Turned around, went back to the Kia garage, which is a model that had just entered South Africa at that stage, and bought this Shuma. Not a very well finished off car, but I still see a lot of them on the road, and they still look as good now as what they looked in those years. Another little point was with the Honda, was the first car that I'd managed to buy cash. And what a difference. I tell you what, I'd come to realize, of course, banks were making hundreds, if not thousands of rands out of anybody buying a car. Since then, I've never bought any other car on credit. Even with businesses that we've managed to start, the vehicles I financed out my pocket. The banks, they don't work with cars. With the next car, It was very much the same sort of experience with the Shuma. We had a friend of ours visiting from Australia, and we took her down on holiday down to KZN. It had been eating me at quite a long time that there was a new Kia model out, the Cerato, a diesel one. And I'd really like to get one, but I couldn't get one anywhere. They were terribly scarce. And then at Bethlehem, I managed to find one. So we travelled down to Bethlehem on the way to KZN, stopped at the garage, bought the car cash, unpacked our suitcases, put them in the new one and rode off. This is the car that vies with that green Volkswagen station wagon that we had as the number one car in our lives. This was a magnificent vehicle. It had those leather seats. It had power that was, at times, I thought was unbelievable for that vehicle. It was really great. Obviously, very light on fuel. A real pleasure to drive. I'm so sorry they took them off the market. You don't get the diesels anymore. With this particular photo, of course, Omar wasn't all that pleased with the grandchildren because the car was new, the seats were white, and you can see them playing with muddy hands all over the car. Then we made another change. We stayed with Kia, but for some amazing reason, we bought this Sportage. It was the most boring car that I've ever owned. It never meant anything. It was totally underpowered, was terribly heavy on fuel. And the best thing of it all was the real reason we purchased it was that it was a 7-seat or something. Or it could take the grandchildren. What were we going to do when we took the grandchildren with us with the Cerato? That was too small for it. So we bought this Sportage, but as I say, boring. Now, a much improved decision. Seeing that the cars, we had two vehicles at this stage of our lives, and we had our own businesses. And Marie had her car, she had the car, and I had the bakkie because birds had come into my life and I needed a bakkie. But we'll get to that. So we bought her this red car, a tiny little Honda Brio, because we decided there was always only the two of us. It was much better on fuel, underpowered as well, but it was a real pleasure to drive. The red Brio only lasted for a few months, and then a new model came out. The garage contacted us, gave us a good deal, so we bought this new little Brio with a few mods and bells and whistles that the red one didn't have. And amazingly, at this stage, the Klerksdorp grandchildren, all three of them, were often with us in the car. So that's where we are at the moment with the cars. We're still driving this little white Brio. Right. That's the end of the cars, or that's where we are with cars at the moment. But as I said in a previous clip, I'd got heavily into birding, and to be able to bird properly at all, I needed a bakkie. So this is the one that I started off with, a second-hand Isuzu. Gave us good service for many years. It wasn't a 4x4, and I had a diff lock fitted to it, which I don't think I ever used in the whole period we had this bakkie, but suffice to say I had it there. And we'd also purchased a caravan at this stage. This was just after the children had all sort of left home, and we've never been totally alone at home, but we were fairly alone at home. And we went on this long trip with the caravan up to Petersburg, down through the Eastern Transvaal, down to KZN, bird watching a lot of the way. But it was just one of those absolutely memorable trips, and this is at a total one stops along the way. None of the canvas water bag on the front of the vehicle now. We could have a proper place to stop it, and it was a real memory bank trip. This photo shows our business up in Louis Trichardt with the vehicles in front of it. My next bakkie was where I got into GWM. They'd just come onto the market. I bought the very first double cab that was sold in Klerksdorp. It's the one second from the right. It was a real tank of a vehicle. Not terribly well put together. Steering was vague. Brakes weren't very, very good. Pretty heavy on fuel. But you know what? That bakkie is still going now. That must be at least 10 years ago that I bought this bakkie. Still being used up at the business. So it has given service the best you can expect from a vehicle of its type. I use it often for birding. Indeed, it is still my vehicle of choice when we go up to visit the kids in Louis Trichardt. And I use it to go around and do atlasing in that area. I do not appreciate spending money on vehicles. I think it's a terribly bad investment, and I try to drive them for as long as possible. But I found out that the first GWM that I bought was just too heavy on fuel, and not having 4x4 capabilities was now becoming a real problem with the places I was going to do bird watching. I then moved on and bought this second-hand GWM 4x4. Wow, it was one magnificent vehicle to drive. Took me so many places. We went up to Zimbabwe with it, no problems. It was really exciting to drive. It just never got stuck, and I can't think I've ever enjoyed any other vehicle much more than what I've enjoyed this one. The problem bucky. The GWM before this one, the one that I like so much, at one stage I tried to drive across a little tree in the middle of the road, and eventually it wasn't a little tree, it was a huge tree that had been cut down and the leaves had just grown out of it. I damaged one of the transfer cases and it kept on leaking oil, so I decided to go for a new GWM. Well, this one was a total catastrophe. They replaced the gearbox twice. They took out that gearbox endlessly to try and get the clutch to stop shuddering. All sorts of odds and ends. This particular photo was taken on a trip to Priska to do an atlasing trip there. It also took me to a wonderful bird in Namibia. A bird pitched up there, a red-throated pipit. It was only the fourth time that it had been seen in Southern Africa, and we three of us got together and decided to go. Rode through the night endlessly. It's a long way there. Managed to see the bird, and then being full of adrenaline and being stupid males, we decided we'd go back via Swakopmund, and the two guys that were with me were very advanced birders. They would show me some of the Namibian birds. 20 odd kilometers outside of Swakopmund we had a pretty horrific accident, which in a number of ways was possibly a bit of luck because the bucky was written off, so it took care of all the damn problems. We had to stay there for almost a week while Mark got his things together, my son, to come and fetch us because we had a lot of odds and ends in the bucky that we couldn't leave there. We got a little Ford Fiesta, slept in it for one night, and we traveled north and south and saw so many birds. So the trip turned out well, and I managed to get another bucky this way, although it was a bit of a drastic way to do it. Well, this is the new bucky that I got after the accident. This photo was taken of Marie near a place called Groenau, I think is the correct pronunciation, in Namibia. We decided to go back and do a whole long trip. I think we did something like 7,000 kilometers that trip. And I would show Marie the places we'd been to. I found Namibia a totally wonderful country to be in. The people, the views, the open expanses, and the birds were just too wonderful. So we saw, thanks mainly to the Reddit, saw all the birds I was hoping to see there, bar one, and then discovered on the way back that I was going to go over my kilometers for the time for the servicing to be done, and I was worried about losing my guarantee because I can just imagine after the first one, GWM weren't very enamored with me, and this bucky also had a bloomin' gearbox problem that the garage still wouldn't fix. They wouldn't accept that it had a problem. So I took it into the service center. We booked into Windhoek. The redhead was very happy. We had to stay at Danviljoen, and they ginned up the place since I'd last been there. We had to stay in a pretty expensive chalet, but she was thrilled with all the spoiling and the grand food, and it really, that trip, everything we touched turned to gold. It just turned out well. I explained to the service manager at Windhoek with the GWM, I said, look, wouldn't you just, when you take this car for a drive after you service it, just check, don't you think there's something wrong with the gearbox? I got back and he said, yeah, definitely, there's not a doubt about it. This gearbox got to be replaced. And I told him the story about all the hassle I'd had with the Klerksdorp GWM. And he said, oh, well, I'm sure they'll get it fixed. We got back to Klerksdorp, and just as a fit-in, another bird had pitched up, snowy egret had pitched up down in Cape Town. So myself and the two of the grandchildren flew down to see that. So we just dropped off the car, the bucky and Marie, and got into the plane and flew down to Cape Town. And then when we got back to Klerksdorp again, there was a call from the local GWM agents. Please, your new gearbox is here. Would you come and we can fit it for you? So this chap in Windhoek had phoned GWM's head office and explained the situation, and they agreed to fix it. And since then, this bucky has gone like an absolute clock. It's an utter pleasure to drive. Could possibly be the last bucky I'm going to buy in my lifetime. One never knows. But it's really given me good service, and it's taken me to see some wonderful birds.